Hello and welcome to the editorial analysis of the Hindu. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 1st of April. So coming to the first article, Seeking the Next Frontier. Now the context here is with regards to the mission Shakti. Now you all know this is a major achievement for India. The DRDO has successfully carried out an anti-satellite test in the lower Earth orbit. So this has reflected India's anti-satellite capabilities. So this is definitely a major achievement for India and the editorial therefore becomes important. Coming to the issues which have been discussed in the editorial, the first issue is that of announcement. Now you should note that India is not the only country to have these capabilities. Before India, US, Russia and China have done these tests. In fact, way back in the year 2007 is when China did this test. Also some other countries like UK and France had these capabilities, but though they have never done a test in that regard. But what is important here is that despite the fact that other countries had these capabilities, none of these other countries have ever made an announcement, or for that matter, the leaders of this country of these countries have never gone about making an announcement of this kind of a test. And this is something that is unique to India. India has made an announcement. The Prime Minister himself congratulated the DRDO for this particular test. Now this is something that has become controversial because this is the time of elections and this is being perceived as hyper nationalism by the ruling government. So that is one issue which has been talked about in this particular editorial. The next issue which has been discussed is with regards to the ASAT capabilities. Now, this anti-satellite capability is basically a part of the ballistic missile defense program that India is carrying out. So this is something that you should know, that this is something that is a part of the BMD program of India. Also the BMD, something that you should know about the BMD is that the BMD targets an incoming ballistic missile. Whereas though ASAT is a part of the BMD program, it is slightly different because in the anti-satellite test, what happens is that in the anti-satellite interceptor, targets are what are held and a hostile satellite is what is attacked. So this is one difference. That means in the ballistic missile program, what happens is that when a missile is what is targeted towards India, a defense is what is created and this missile is what is intercepted midway in its path. Whereas what happens in the anti-satellite capabilities is that a satellite that is rotating the earth itself is what is chosen, it is targeted, and that satellite is what is destroyed. Comparatively, the anti-satellite capabilities are easier as compared to the ballistic missile defense technology, because in the missile technology it has to be intercepted midway in its path, whereas a satellite is moving in one orbit only, so it's easier to track the satellite. So that is one detail aspect that has been analyzed in the editorial. Next, what has been discussed here is with regards to the ballistic missile defense program itself. Now this program, according to the editorial, was something that India adhered to or India started in the aftermath of the growing missile capabilities of Pakistan in the 1990s. This was primarily because Pakistan was acquiring missiles from China as well as from North Korea. So to counter that, India embarked upon this program in the year 1999. So that's about a little bit of history of the BMD program. Next, what is very, very important and what has been discussed in the editorial is with regards to a crowded space. Now this is an analysis of the entire to a gamut of all the satellites that are present in the space. Here you should know that the first satellite in space was what was the Sputnik. It was launched in the year 1957. And since then, approximately 8,000 satellites are what have been launched. Out of these 8,000, 5,000 satellites are what are still there in orbit. So amongst these 5,000 satellites, approximately 2,000 satellites are what are functional. So this is something that you should know, that 5,000 are in orbit and 2,000 are functional. That means the remaining are non-functional satellites. Amongst these 2,000 functional, 800 are what belong to the US, 280 are what belong to China, and 150 satellites belong to Russia. So this is a distribution of these satellites. Also, you should know that India has a share of 50 satellites at present. Also amongst these 2,000 satellites, approximately 300 satellites are the military satellites of different countries. 140 amongst them are of US, 90 are of Russia and 40 are of China. And amongst these 300 military satellites, only 2 are of India. One is dedicated to the Indian Navy and the second is dedicated to the Indian Air Force. So this is some data and analysis vis-a-vis the satellites that are present in space, and this is one part of this editorial which is very important because this knowledge is something that you can use in your answers if given an opportunity. Another thing that is important and which has been discussed here is with regards to the space debris. Now, the space debris is the broken satellites or some debris that is generated out of this satellite. What happens is that this debris continues to revolve in the orbits, and this poses a risk to the other satellites and spacecrafts. You must have seen the movie Gravity. In that, it is well shown how space debris is a major challenge at present. You should know that at present the space debris is to the tune of approximately 6,000 tons. So that is something that has been mentioned in this particular editorial. Another thing which has been mentioned is that approximately 23,000 objects are what are tracked by the US State Department. So these are the objects which are major space debris, and these are what are tracked by US. Also, what is important here is that India is being accused of carrying out this satellite test and thereby generating space debris. But here India is saying in its defense that India has carried out this test in the lower Earth orbit, which is approximately 300 kilometers only. So the debris generated by India is not much, and it is not much challenging. Whereas when China carried out its test in the year 2007, at that point of time it was accused for generating huge amount of debris. That too in the higher orbits is where China did this test, and it was believed that at that point of time that approximately 3,000 objects is what was added to the space debris at that point of time. So definitely India cannot be criticized much, because India has been conscious and careful about not generating much of debris. Another thing that is important that has been discussed here is with regards to the international control of space. Now here you should know that at present there is no international treaty vis-a-vis the control of space. There has also been demands globally that there is a need to prevent the militarization of space. Some treaties that are existing is the 1967 Outer Space Treaty and the 1979 Moon Treaty. But these treaties were way before the immediate rise of satellites and large number of satellites entering the space. So definitely a treaty which can control these satellites is what is going to be warranted, but at present there is no such treaty. The US, you should know, is opposed to negotiating any treaty, and this is primarily because the US has a dominance in the space. Large number of satellites, both military as well as the civilian satellites, are what belong to the US, as a result of which US is unwilling to get any control from other countries or share its power with other countries. So that is one issue vis-a-vis space management and international control of space. So this is something that is important. Another thing that you should know, that the European Union is continuously demanding for an international code of conduct in the space, which should be based on transparency and confidence building measures between countries. But definitely at present there is no such treaty or no such code that is being talked about. So that is something that has been highlighted in the editorial. Next issue is the issue of next frontier. Now here the editorial is saying that even if India has achieved this ASAT capability, some things more is what is required for India to touch the newer frontier, which is the space situational awareness capabilities is what India needs to harness and work upon. Also, long-range tracking radars is what India needs to work upon. Only then can India have the anti-satellite capabilities equivalent to countries like the US and, for that matter, China. So that is what has been highlighted here. Indeed, the editorial is very, very important, especially from the internal security point of view. This article is going to be an important one. So that is the relevance. Coming to the next article, the arrogance of the ignorant. Now, the context here is with regards to the February 13 judgment of the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court called for the eviction of approximately 10 lakh people who couldn't prove their claim under the Forest Rights Act. So this is an article again in that line. We've discussed many such articles, but some newer points for what were discussed here, so I've included that. Coming to the issues which are important, the first issue is with regards to the traditional knowledge. Now, this editorial gives us an example of the tsunami of the year 2004 that hit Andaman and Nicobar Islands. According to the editorial, the tribes of these islands, that is the Jaravas and the Onges tribe, these were the tribal communities who were not damaged by the tsunami. This was primarily because these communities followed the animals to the highlands well before the waves hit the coast. So definitely there is a mention of the traditional knowledge which the tribal communities have and which are being ignored and which are being undermined by the educated and the literate of the country is what has been highlighted here. These kind of examples, when you find them in editorial, you can make a note of them, you can replicate them in your essays, in your answers. They give a good impression. Another thing that has been discussed here is the issue of biopiracy. Now what happens is, that there is a lot of traditional knowledge which the Adivasis have. Often the Western drug and pharma companies, they send their representatives to these Adivasis and they try and gather this information from them. And once this information is what is gathered from them, then they go ahead and make their researches and get a patent on this information. So what happens is that the traditional knowledge is what is extracted, what is exploited, and as a result of which this is something that amounts to a piracy, which is the biopiracy. And once a patent is what is received, then what happens is that even the Adivasis are not allowed to use their traditional knowledge, because they are also accused of not following the patent laws, despite the fact that the knowledge was what was theirs traditionally. So these kind of exploitation is what continuously does happen, is what has been highlighted here. Next is the issue of forest conservation. Now here the editorial is discussing that behind the judgment, the intention behind the judgment was to ensure that forest conservation is what takes place. But the editorial is discussing that forest conservation is something that takes place along with human beings rather than separate from human beings. There is a mindset that for forest conservation, man should not interfere in the forest. But this, the editorial is saying, is a wrong approach, because the Adivasis are very much a part of the forest, and also in those parts of the forest in India where the Adivasis continue to reside and their habitats are what are restored even today, or what are maintained even today. Those are the best conserved forests in India. So if that is one case study that is taken, then clearly it should be established that the Adivasis have an immense role in the conservation and protection of forests. So this kind of judgment, or this kind of an approach where a separate model is what is envisaged, where Adivasis are removed for forest conservation, that is a flawed model. Rather, an integrated model where they are a part of the conservation is what needs to be propagated. So that is what has been highlighted here. Next is the issue of criticism of the judgment. Now, as I mentioned in the previous discussion also, in the previous issue also, which is of forest conservation, that the judgment is what is being criticized for not taking a holistic view. Also, the judgment is being criticized for not being a humane one. The editorial is discussing that if these 10 lakh people are to be evicted, then where are these people going to go? What is going to be their source of livelihood? How could the Supreme Court ignore such important questions and not bother about these people and give such a harsh judgment, is what has been mentioned in the editorial. Next, the editorial is criticizing the government for giving some examples. For instance, the editorial is discussing that the world's largest refinery is what is being built in Konkan, and this is what is going to result in a destruction of approximately 17 villages, as well as millions of trees are what are going to be cut. Also, the world's tallest dam is what is being built in Pancheshwar in Uttarakhand. This is again going to lead to submergence of a large amount of area. So if government is continuously doing these kind of steps, which is destroying the habitats, then why is it that the the judgment was against the Adivasis and not against the government, which is doing such kind of steps? Also, the amendments to the Indian Forest Act of 1927 is what is in the pipeline. So that is also something that has been criticized in this particular editorial. So in a gist, this editorial is a criticism of the judgment of the Supreme Court. We've taken up several discussions on this issue, and this is going to be one of the most important issues for this year mains, especially in the ethics paper. So that is the entire relevance of this particular article. Coming to the next article, the Kartarpur Focus. The context here is with regards to the Kartarpur corridor talks. Now, what has basically happened is that the talks have been postponed. The next round of the talks has what have been postponed. So this article is what has been written. First and foremost, you should know about this corridor, which is the Kartarpur corridor. We've discussed this previously also. Now, this is a corridor that is envisaged between India and Pakistan. This is going to connect the Dera Baba Nanak in Punjab in India and the Kartarpur Sahib Gurdwara in Pakistan, Punjab. So this is what you should know, that Dera Baba Nanak Gurdwara in Punjab in India and Kartarpur Sahib Gurdwara in Pakistan, Punjab is what is going to be connected here. Now, the issues that have been discussed, the first issue is that of optimism. Now, a lot of optimism is what is being shown around this corridor. This is primarily because this is what has been talked about after the Pulwama attack. So it is being envisaged that this could bring a thaw in relations between India and Pakistan. This could improve the relations between India and Pakistan. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Also, Prime Minister Modi has considered this equivalent to the falling of the Berlin Wall. So that is the optimism around the Kartarpur corridor. Also, what is important is the details about this corridor is what are being talked about. For example, what will be the number of pilgrims that will be attending, what will be the security restrictions, what will be the documentation process and the mode of transport. All these details are what are being worked out between India and Pakistan. Third is the issue of distrust between India and Pakistan. This is primarily in the aftermath of the Pulwama attack and the Balakot airstrike. So definitely there is a distrust between the two countries, and this is a major cause of concern vis-a-vis the Kartarpur corridor. Another thing which is important for which the talks have been postponed is the Khalistani sentiment. Now the security advisors in India have advised that there is a fear that the committee that is going to hold talks on the Kartarpur corridor in India from Pakistan side are having some elements who are going to fan the Khalistani sentiment in India, and this is something that is being feared as a security threat in India. So to ask explanation on this, the talks of what have been postponed, but the editorial is criticizing this gesture by the government. It is being said here that despite the fact that the security of India and anti-Khalistan, or for that matter Khalistan sentiment, is something that is a cause of concern to India, and India's security is definitely threatened here, but postponing talks, or for that matter concluding talks without a particular solution, is something that is not justiciable, and as a result of which India should continue talks on this corridor, as this corridor has huge potential to eventually build good relations between India and Pakistan. So that is what has been analyzed in this particular editorial. Kartarpur corridor is going to be one of the most important topics under the India-Pakistan relation, which already is very, very important for this year. So that is why I would suggest all of you all to make a note of the Kartarpur corridor, and whenever you have an opportunity to discuss about India-Pakistan, you should bring about this point in your answers. So that is going to be the relevance. Now, before we finish, please take a note at our programs. We are starting our IAS prelims revision classes from the 20th of April, and also an IAS regular batch from the 15th of April. So please take a note of our programs. I thank you all for watching this video.